Welcome back, everybody. We're here for another play of the day. Today, we're going to be looking at Anton Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard, which is a fun little turn of the century 1904 Russian play that misguidedly tries to teach us that communism would be a good idea for Russia. So, this play centers around an idiot. Her name is Lyubov Androvna Ravenskaya, and Lyubov has a brother named Leonid Gaev, who is also an idiot. Lyubov and Gaev live together in this huge estate that their parents left to them. And it's this beautiful old house where they've spent most of their lives and they love it. But the real reason that they love it is because behind this house, there is this cherry orchard. And it goes on for as far as you can see. And it's like world famous because it's just so massive and beautiful. And it is the pride of the Gaev family. Now, in the past, Lyubov was married and she had three children. She had Varia, who's actually adopted and just incredibly practical and pragmatic. She's kind of in charge of the estate now since Lyubov and Gaev really can't handle it. But Varia is very like nuts and bolts. This is what we need to be doing. Then she has Anya, and Anya is 17 years old and just kind of head in the sky and just a dreamer. And then she had a son named Greece. 5 years ago, Greece drowned, and it broke Lyubov's heart. Her husband had already died. She was living in this estate with her family, and then her son drowned. Meanwhile, she has a boyfriend that lives in Paris. So 5 years ago, so that she wasn't constantly reminded of the death of her son, she went off to Paris and started living with this boyfriend. Thing is, that didn't work out well. It ended in Lyubov trying to commit suicide. Keep in mind, this play is a comedy. So she tried to commit suicide, and her daughter Anya heard about it and she rushed off to Paris to retrieve her mother. So at the beginning of this play, Anya and Lyubov are arriving back in Russia. It's Lyubov's first time since being there at the death of her son. They also come, these across the bottom, these are servants. They come with Yasha. Yasha is French. He is a servant of the boyfriend who was like, well, if you're leaving me, at least take a manservant so that it's not two women traveling back to Russia together. So they come in with Yasha. There are a few other important people in this story. There is a guy named Trofimov. Trofimov used to be Greece's tutor. However, Greece died, and Trofimov just never left. For 5 years, he's just been sitting around, reading their books, eating their food. And the real reason for that is that he's actually very in love with Anya. So no one ever kicked him out. So Trofimov is really the voice of communism in this story. And he is what's called the eternal student. Like he's 30 years old and he's never really worked a day in his life. Then you get down here to the servants. They've got a really old butler. Like his character description is that he's 87. And his name is Fears. And Fears kind of just putters around the house and tries to do his job, but he's also kind of delusional and he is always complaining about how things are not like they used to be. Then they have a maid named Dunyasha and a manservant named Yepikodov. And Yepikodov is madly in love with Dunyasha. And a few months ago, he proposed to her. And she's just playing it coy because she likes the attention, but she also isn't sure if she wants to marry Yepikodov. And finally, you have Carlotta. Carlotta is this crazy nanny. Like she raised Anya and Varia in Greece, but she also is like an amateur magician and kind of just a gypsy with premonitions and stuff. So she's really like this crazy old character. All right. Laubov and Anya and Yasha arrive at the house very early in the morning at the beginning of this play. And they are met by Gaev, her brother, and Lepakin. Lepakin is a very important character. He is their lawyer, but he's very unique because his father was their father's servant. So the fact that he's risen all the way from being the son of a servant to being their lawyer is like this mobility that didn't used to happen in Russia, but now is starting to happen. They're starting to be a middle class. So you have Lepakin and you have Laubov having a conversation. And Lepakin comes in and he's like, Laubov, I am first off sorry that you tried to kill yourself. Glad it didn't work. We have a situation. He's like, your family is so far in debt that in 3 months, they are going to auction off your house to the highest bidder to try to help pay off your debt. And she's like, well, I can't imagine how that could happen. We're rich. And he's like, you were rich, but then your husband died. No one got a job. And you spent all the money. You have no money. And she says, well, that can't be because we're rich. And he goes, again, you're not. He said, but as your lawyer, I have some advice for you. And she's like, okay, go ahead. He says, you have such a beautiful estate here. You could cut down the cherry orchard. And she's like, what? And he says, just hear me out. Cut down the cherry orchard. Use the wood from the cherry trees to build cottages. And then other people can come, like, stay in the cottages, and you'll get rent money from them. It will get rid of the cherry orchard, but it's not like you're selling the cherries or anything. It's just there to look pretty. You could turn this into a profitable business. And she's like, but I love the cherry orchard and it's world famous, so I need a different idea. He's like, I don't have any other ideas, but this would pay off your debt. This would save your house. You and your family can forever remain in this beautiful home. And she's like, well, it's not so beautiful without a cherry orchard, now is it? I grew up in that cherry orchard. I used to run through all of the trees. I can't possibly do that. I'm sure we'll get money somehow. And he's like, how? And she's like, details. So in the next scene, we come up on Dunyasha and Carlotta and Yasha all hanging out together. Because Dunyasha is supposedly going to be engaged to and marry Yepikodov. But Yasha is from Paris, and Yasha is cultured and intriguing. So Dunyasha is kind of like just changing her mind. She'd rather be with Yasha. And Carlotta's just sitting there talking to them about crazy stuff and about like how she doesn't think this is going to work out well, and she's psychic, so she would know. And up come Varya and Anya and Trofimov and Laubov. And this is where the play really starts to just state what it wants to say. Trofimov has been reading a lot, including the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. And he's come to realize all human value to him is based in work. Now, that's an ironic thing to say to a woman who doesn't have a job and expects money to just pop up. But he's like, no, our value as humans is our work and what we bring to the world and what we do in the world, which is also ironic coming from someone who also has never had a job. And once that his little tutor kid died, he just stayed. But no, he's convinced value comes from work. And Laubov is upset by this, and she goes walking into the house. She's like, no, there has to be another way. And that leaves Anya and Varya and Trofimov hanging out in this field. And Varya is like, I've been telling Mother for years that we needed money. And I can see it plain as day right there in our ledger books. We're going to lose this house unless someone can talk her into doing the cherry orchard plan that Lepakin told us we should do, or can convince her to do something else to get money. And then Varya goes off, and it leaves Anya and Trofimov alone, and they have this moment where they're like just about to kiss, and Trofimov is like, I love you so much, 17-year-old, and I'm 30. And she's like, I know. And he's like, but I like to think that we're above love. Because of course he does. Because Trofimov wants to be so smart and not buy into convention. So they end up not kissing, but they still clearly love each other from, afar. And by afar, I mean a gap of 12 years age difference. Eventually, the day comes that the house is going to be auctioned. So Laubov and Gaev have written off to their very wealthy aunt. But the difference in Laubov and Gaev is they like to spend a lot of money. And their very wealthy aunt is still wealthy because she doesn't. So she sends them like, I don't know, $4,000, which at the time was not nothing. But she's like, yeah, here, use this, buy your house back. And they're like, oh, great, look, money just appeared, everything fine, everything saved. And Laubov says, I'm just so nervous. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't go to this auction because I'm a woman. So we're going to send our lawyer, Lepakin, with Gaev, and they're going to go. And I just can't sit around the house and wait. So I'm going to throw a huge party. The woman has no money. The woman can't afford her house. But she's like hiring a string quartet. So she's throwing this big party. The problem with this party, though, is they used to throw parties in this house that would be attended by like the dukes and duchesses and royalty, and the wealthiest people in Moscow would come out to their home. And it's so wonderful. But now it's being attended by like the mailman and the milkman and just workers from town. And there aren't enough women. So they let Dunyasha dress up in one of Anya's dresses so that she can go and be someone to dance with. And Carlotta is the entertainment and doing all these card tricks. And Yasha is off playing pool. And so it's kind of this other place where communism is coming true. Like the very, very wealthy and the very, very poor are mixing into this one party. But the only person who is not okay with this at all is Fears. Fears is puttering around with his tray full of cocktail glasses, just like, we used to have dukes and duchesses. Now we have the milkman. Now we have maids dressed as ladies. He is not happy because it's not how it used to be. And he's 87. He 100% represents the way things were. He represents the old ways of the aristocracy. And so he doesn't like this party. But eventually, Trofimov comes in to Laubov and he's like, Laubov, I just need to talk to you for a second. And she's like, oh, whatever about? Isn't this a great party? I'm having a wonderful time at my party. And he's like, it's a good party, but you need to take a second to prepare yourself for the fact that you might not get this house back. And she's like, but we got $4,000 from our aunt, so we're going to be fine. He's like, but you might not be. And she's like, oh, I'm sure that everything's going to work out just fine. And he's like, you need to become more pragmatic in how you handle things. And she's like, okay, yeah, tomorrow. So eventually, Lopakin and Gaev come back to the house. And she's like, oh, Gaev, my dear brother Gaev. Oh, and I told you Gaev is also crazy. Like, he has conversations with pieces of furniture crazy. He's weird. But she's like, Gaev, what happened? What happened? And Gaev just walks out of the room. He doesn't even say anything. And she turns to Lopakin and she's like, but we got the $4,000. And Lopakin says, the bidding started higher than $4,000. Gaev didn't even get to put in one bid. Your house is no longer your house. And Laubov says, but how can that be? Who bought it? And Lopakin says, I did. And I am going to cut down the cherry orchard. And she's like, no, we can still just live here because we're your friend. And he's like, no, I'm going to live here. I bought the house where my father used to be a servant. And I am going to cut down the cherry orchard. And I am going to build cottages. And I am going to make money off that. And we're going to spread out the wealth of this place where servants can also become wealthy and help other people who need homes. We're going to do this. I told you to do this. You said no. And so I'm doing it instead. Now, it is interesting because Lopakin is often cast as like this evil character who's betraying Laubov and Gaev, but he's not. He told them how to do it. He's their lawyer. He made it clear what should happen. And yet, according to lots of interpretations, because people like Laubov, because who can help but love an idiot? And he's like, they love her and they're like, oh, Lopakin's awful. No, Lopakin told you his plan at the beginning of Act 1. He's the good guy in this play. He's the one bringing down the aristocracy and spreading the wealth. Keep in mind, that is because Anton Chekhov, the playwright, wants for everyone to believe in communism. So, in the final scene, Laubov and Drovna and her family are all packing up to go. They've covered all the furniture in sheets. They've boarded up the windows, which seems unnecessary since Lepakin plans to move in. And as it starts, you can hear people outside chopping down cherry trees. And Anya comes in to Lepakin and she's like, "Why are you starting them before we leave? That is like the cruelest thing you could do to my mother." And Lepakin's like, "Yeah, that is rude. I'm gonna go stop them until y'all leave." And out they come. Carlotta knows that she's out of a job. She's asking Laubov to give her some other job, and Laubov's like, "I wish I could, but I have ruined my life by spending all my money." And Carlotta's like, "Okay, then just write me a reference." And everyone's packing up. And of course, Laubov's not being the least bit dramatic about the whole thing as she walks through the room, touching everything and having memories of it. And Anya and Varia are trying to help get her out of the house. And the servants are all like packing up and they realize they're never going to see the family again. And everybody leaves. And they close the door, and you hear them nail up boards outside of the door. And in the darkness, in walks Fears, the 87-year-old butler. And he comes out and he's like, "Wait for me. Wait for me. Oh, they have forgotten me. Because they've forgotten the old ways. They're all communists now." And he's like, "I am tired. I will lie here and rest." He lays down on the couch and dies. Right there, right in that moment, Fears, representing all the old world, Fears is dead. And as lights go down on the play, you just see this dead old butler, and you hear them cutting down the cherry orchard. It's a comedy, folks. I gotta say, Anton Chekhov, he loved this play because the rising up servant wins. And he's like, "Yeah, that's the message I want to tell." One of the best endings of a play ever, quite frankly. But it's a really, really enjoyable one. So the next one that we're going to be doing is 12 Angry Men from 1948. And I decided we're going to wrap up with The Crucible by Arthur Miller in this unit. So thank you very much and enjoy.